Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari. Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari. Gopi Janavalabha Girivardhari. Jaya Gopi Janavalabha Girivardhari. Jashodanandana Brajajana Ranjana. Jashodanandana Brajajana Ranjana. Jamuna Tira Vanachari. Jamuna Tira Vanachari. Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Jai Om Vishnupad Paramahamsa Parirajigacharya Ashtotara Shata Shri Srimad His Divine Grace A.C. Bhakti Vedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. Prem Se Kaho Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Srivasadi Gaura Bhakta Vrinda Ki Jai. Nitai Gaura Premanande. All glories to assembly devotees. All glories to the assembly devotees. All glories to the assembly devotees. All glories to the lotus feet of Sri Guru and Sri Gauranga. All glories to Srila Prabhupada. Is there a book? No, that's my collection. Okay, reading from the 5th canto, chapter 2, text number 16. Title of the canto is The Creative Impetus. Is it? Well, but we're reading from 16. Because Balaram, he did quite a few verses yesterday. No, we're supposed to be on 16. Yeah. So, title of the chapter is The Activities of Maharaj Agnidra. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Narayanam Namaskritya Naranchaiva Narotamam Devim Saraswatim Vyasam Tato Jayam Udirayet Nasupraya Shurabhadreshu Nityam Bhagavata Sevaya Bhagavati Uttama Shloke Bhaktir Bhavati Naishtiki Krishnaya Vasudevaya Devaki Nandanaya Cha Nanda Gopakumaraya Govindaya Namo Namaha. Okay. What is Brahma Samhita? Na tvam. Okay. Na tvam tyajami dayitam tvija deva datam yasmin mano drig api no na viyati viyati lagnam mam charu shringi arhasi netam anuvratam te chitam ta pratisaratu shivaha sachivaya na tvam tajami dahitam dvija deva datam yasmin mano drigapi no naviyanti lagnam mam chara shringi arhasi netum anuvratam te Chittam yataha pratisarantu shiva sachiva na tvam tajami dayitam dvija deva datam yasmin mano drigapi no nadvidyanti lagnam mam charu shringi arhasi netam anuvratam te chittam yata pratisarantu siva sachiva na tvam tajami dayitam dvija deva datam yasmin mano drigapi no naviyanti lagnam mam chara shringi arhasi netum anuvratam te chittam yata pratisaram tu siva sachinvaha Manotrikapino Vedivyati Lagnam. Dam Devadatam Yasmin Manodrigapino Nanavyanti Lagnam Pradante Nam Yata Pratisaram Tusiva Sajitva. Anyone else? Or okay, no, not Tvam, you. Tajami, I shall give up. Daitam, very dear. Dvija Deva, by Lord Brahma, the demigod worshipped by the Brahmanas. Tatam, given. Yasmin, unto whom? Mana, mind. Drik, eyes. Api, also. Na, my. Naviyati, naviyati. Do not go away. Lagnam, tightly attached. Mam, me. Charu Shringi, a woman with beautiful raised breasts. Arhasi, you ought. Natum, to lead. Anuvratam, follower. Te, your. Chitam, desire. Yataha, wherever. Pratisarantu, may follow. Shivaha, favorable. Sachivaya, friends. Translation and purport by His Divine Grace A.C. Bhakti Vedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada Ki Chai. Lord Brahma, who is worshipped by the Brahmanas, has very merciful given you to me, and that is why I have met you. I do not want to give up your company, for my mind and eyes are fixed upon you and cannot be drawn away. O woman with beautiful raised breasts, I am your follower. You may take me wherever you like, and your friends may also follow me. Purport. Now Agnidra frankly admits his weakness. He was attracted to Purvachati, and therefore, before she could say, "But I have no business with you," he expressed his desire to be united with her. He was so attracted that he was ready to go anywhere, hell or heaven, in her company. When one is absorbed in lust and the influence of sex, one surrenders to the feet of a woman without reservations. Srila Madhvacharya remarks in this connection that when one engages in joking and talking like a crazy person, one may say anything and everything, but his words will be meaningless. Om Agyanatimirandasya Gananjana Shalakoya Chakshurun Minitam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha Shri Chaitanya Manobhistam Stapitam Yena Bhutale Swayam Rupa Kadatmayam Dadati Swam Badantikam Kun Korati Vachalam Bhangolam Tegirim Yad Kripa Tarham Vande Shri Gurum Dinatarinam Agisha Yasha Varane Lakshmi Yasha Chavakshashi Yasha Shte Hridaye Samvitam Nashimham Naham Bhaje. When I read this verse in purport, I was reminded of a verse from the Chaitanya Charitamrita. Amim indriya priti vacha tari balikam krishnindriya priti icha tare premanam. And in this particular part of the Chaitanya Charitamrita, Krishnadas Kaviraj Goswami, he is actually giving a definition of what is the difference between lust and love. Very helpful to know. And so the verse, what it says, something very interesting. It says that the desire to gratify one's own senses is kama, lust, but the desire to please the senses of Krishna is prema, or love. So, So in the purport we see how Madhavacharya has defined the characteristics of a crazy person, and due to the behavior of Agnidra, it's very clear that he has become a crazy person due to the influence of lust. And so it's explained in the Bhagavad Gita that when a living entity contemplates the sense objects, he actually develops a sangha, or a relationship with them. It's said in the second chapter of the Bhagavad Gita, Dayato visayam pumsam sangastesu pajayate sangat sanjayate kaman kamat kroda bijayate. So when one contemplates the objects of the senses, one develops an attraction for them and a lust for them. And from that lust comes a what's known as a sangha. And the sangha, Srila Prabhupada translates in the Bhagavad Gita as attachment. But there's another way in which we can understand the word sangha. The word sangha, it has the word anga in it, which literally means limb. So when one develops a sangha with something, for instance, we have sadhu sangha in the temple. And we consider the relationships that we have with the devotees to be extensions of ourselves. They're like a part of who we are, just like we have an arm. It's a part of who we are. It's an anga. It's a limb of who we are. So when one contemplates the objects of the senses, that contemplation and the object itself, it becomes a part of who that person is. And when one makes an effort to interact with that particular object of the senses, what happens is the result is one gradually loses all intelligence, and based on that loss of intelligence, one becomes willing to do practically anything in order to satisfy that particular desire. The other day, when I was at Balboa Park, I met this man who was he was sitting on the grass, and he was kind of just sitting there. He looked like he was like taking rest or something from like walking. So I just went up and I approached him. And I said, I showed him the books, and he gave me $5. And so I was like, you know what? I think I'll give you this book. I gave him a Nectar of Devotion. It's one of my favorite books to distribute. And so I keep on distributing, and he comes up to me about 5 minutes later, and he asks me, so I just have a question. What is this book all about? What is this book about? And I began to explain to him that, ultimately we're all looking for happiness. And the place that we try to find happiness is generally within the relationships that we have. Even the richest man in the world, he can work so hard to accumulate cars, a bank balance, a nice home, so many nice things. But at the end of the day, he looks for a girlfriend. And then when that girlfriend, rips him off at the end of the day, he ultimately just wants like a real friend. So we are innately looking for relationships, I explained to him, but due to our misidentification with the material body, which is what we're not, we seek things which are in relationship to the body rather than in relationship to who we really are. So this book teaches you that you're innately spiritual, and the relationships that you're seeking aren't going to come from the combination and permutations of the material energy. Rather, it comes from that which is of a similar nature as you, which is spiritual. So the whole point of this book is to help reawaken that natural relationship that you have with that person who is of a similar nature as you. And he really appreciated that. And on many occasions I've explained the Nectar of Devotion to people, and of all the books that I explain to people, if someone asks, well, what is this particular book about? And then I explain it. You just explain, you give a synopsis of the introduction in the preface that Srila Prabhupada gives to that Nectar of Devotion. people become so moved because they can very much relate with it. That in this world there's relationships that we're looking for, we're trying to be satisfied, but ultimately at the end of the day we're never quite satisfied with the outcome. And it's because, we have a propensity to want to love forever. I remember Vishnu Jan Maharaj, he gives this example. He says that, when you go to a playground, you see on the tree that it says, Mary loves Tom forever. And then you go back there a week later, it says, Mary loves John forever. And then Mary loves, Steve forever. And this propensity, Mary's looking for someone to love forever, but she's looking for it in people who are innately temporary. So the Nectar of Devotion is teaching people how to seek that eternal relationship. So I explained this, he appreciated it. And the point that I was making is that of all the books, if you explain the Nectar of Devotion to people on its own merit, people become very moved because they can relate with it. So I explained it, and he felt compelled to tell me his entire life story. And that happens sometimes on book distribution. You're just some stranger in the street, and then all of a sudden you give them a spiritual book, and they feel compelled to tell you everything that they've done in their entire life. So I was speaking to him, and he said, at the age of 20, I became very disenchanted with my family. We had a major falling out. And I made a vow at the age of 20, by the time I'm 30, I'll be a millionaire. And because his whole logic is that success is the greatest revenge. So if I can show them, just look what I did without you, then surely I can be satisfied. So he explained to me, he said, I'm 31 now and I did it. I'm a millionaire. I live in a really nice apartment in downtown San Diego. But in the process of becoming a millionaire, there's no time just to stop and celebrate, because it's one thing after the next. You have no time just to sit there and appreciate, well, I did it. Rather, he says he's in more anxiety than he was previously. And he says, the only way I'm able to get free from this anxiety is I go on this walk at Balboa Park every day. There's a 4-mile loop, is what he's telling me, around the whole trail that they have at Balboa Park. There's things that drop into the valley, and he goes on this very lengthy walk on a daily basis at Balboa Park. And he says, this is the only thing that gives me any satisfaction, because I feel by coming out, this walk is an expression of my searching for something more than what I have right now. And I feel like, and he says, I feel like meeting you, I finally am getting a sense of what that actually is. So this gives a really nice example. His name was Ryan. He's a really nice guy. Yeah, he took down my phone number and everything. I told him about the Krishna Lounge, and he's a really nice guy. And so this is a perfect example of this verse, Dayato Visayam Pumsam, that, he was contemplating the sense objects, and he had this idea that if I can accumulate a certain amount of money, when I achieve that amount of money, I'll finally be satisfied. But he admitted to me that, in the process of me trying to make all this money, I had to go through so much hardship, sleepless nights, eatless days, and I probably had to step on the heads of a lot of people that I shouldn't have. And it left me completely miserable and dissatisfied. So he lost his intelligence in the process of trying to, satisfy this material desire. So we become completely mad. We become completely crazy when we're overcome by this kama. But actually, we understand, according to the conclusion of the Srimad Bhagavatam, that just as Agnidra is going crazy by the influence of lust, similarly the devotee is actually meant to go crazy by the influence of love for Krishna. And actually our whole process of sadhana bhakti, Rupa Goswami explains, is that sadhana bhakti are those activities which are meant to bring about bhava bhakti. In other words, everything that we do in our application of Krishna consciousness is ultimately meant to make us mad after Krishna. Coming in the morning for the morning program, seeing the deities, chanting the holy name, being with the devotees, taking prasadam, kirtan, book distribution, every activity that we're doing is meant to make us mad after Krishna. And this stage is attained in gradual steps. First, one comes in contact with the mercy of Krishna or the devotees, and from that contact with the devotees, one develops a little bit of faith in the process that these people are different. I see something in them that I'm not seeing within other people. And so through being inspired by these people that they met, they feel maybe I should spend a little bit more time with them. So this is known as sadhu sangha. They come in the association of devotees and they spend some time with the devotees, and they gradually begin to learn the process of how to become a devotee himself. And this is known as bhajana kriya. After applying the process from what they've learned from the devotees, one decides to take the first step towards spiritual advancement, which is ultimately to surrender to a spiritual master. And then the spiritual master, evaluating the nature of the disciple, begins to notice how to engage the disciple properly in such a way that it will accommodate his psychophysiological nature, so he can make gradual advancement towards the path of, towards the goal of Bhava Bhakti. But in order for us to make steady progress, we have some stuff we have to clear out. And this clearing of the stuff can take a little bit of time. But through diligent and deliberate effort to apply the process according to the way the spiritual master has provided it, there's no doubt that we can easily overcome those things. And when one overcomes those things, they're firmly fixed in the path of Krishna consciousness, meaning they've attained a stage called nishta, which means that they're completely convinced that surrender to Krishna and giving one's entire life to Krishna there's nothing beyond that. And that any responsibilities, any obligations I may have in this world, simply by giving my entire life to Krishna, all those things are fulfilled. So after coming to that stage of being fixed and understanding that serving Krishna is the greatest thing I can possibly do, and I'm not going to touch anything else besides this from now on, one comes to a level of having some genuine taste for the process. One begins to feel that what is in this holy name? What is it with the Srimad Bhagavatam that is making me feel this way? What's bringing these emotions out? One becomes completely enraptured with the experience of interacting with the different activities of devotional service. And then from there, it comes a stage known as Ashakti. There's a genuine attraction for Krishna, and from this Ashakti gives rise to Bhava Bhakti. So this is our entire process from beginning to end, and it's explained in the Chaitanya Charitamrita, Nitya Siddha Krishna Prema Sadhya Kabanoy Shravanadi Shuddha Chitta Karanai Udoy, that this process from beginning to end is nourished by the process of hearing and chanting. Simply by coming in the association of devotees and hearing the Srimad Bhagavatam and chanting the Maha Mantra, this seed, this Bhakti Lata Bij, the creeper of devotional service, is actually watered very naturally. And one doesn't need to engage in activities besides the pure activities of devotional service in order for one to make progress. Nitya Siddha means that the eternal position of the living entity, Krishna Prema, is to have Krishna Prema. And simply through hearing and chanting in the association of devotees, this dormant propensity is brought out. It's just like a boy and girl. The boy at the age of 5 years old, he may not necessarily be attracted to girls. But as he grows, then naturally this dormant propensity to be attracted to the opposite sex comes about. So similarly, we have a natural attraction for Krishna actually. It's our constitutional position. And I once looked up what constitutional means in the synonyms. And the synonym of constitutional means intrinsic. It's our intrinsic nature to have love for Krishna. And this love for Krishna, when it's covered over by the material nature, we direct it towards the material energy in its different forms, combinations, and permutations. But by hearing and chanting, the heart is cleansed. Cheto darpana marjanam. The heart is cleansed. The mirror of the heart is cleansed away. All of our misconceptions and our upadis which prevent us from serving Krishna with pure love. The designations that thinking that I'm this man, I'm a woman, I belong to this particular country, I'm a nice brahmachari. All these things are cleared away. And one begins to act on the platform of serving Krishna with genuine love. Lord Chaitanya, when he first met his spiritual master Ishvara Puri, he was instructed that, actually you're a fool. So you should just chant this Hare Krishna mantra, then everything will be revealed. Lord Chaitanya, he started chanting this mantra with a lot of faith, and all of a sudden he began to experience these ecstatic symptoms of love for Krishna. And so he returned to his spiritual master. He's like, what's going on here? I mean, why is all these things happening? And Ishvara Puri explained that it's the nature of the Maha Mantra that whoever chants it, automatically ecstatic love is brought out. So we're being given all the tools. We're being given all the facility in order to make advancement. And we see in the lives of Mahaprabhu that the associates that have come to this level of advanced Krishna consciousness, our ultimate goal in life, that they're willing to do anything and everything to please the Lord, just as the lusty materialist is willing to do anything and everything in order to satisfy his material desires and motives. So similarly, we see that Murari Chaitanya, in order to fulfill the order of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, he walked up to a tiger, slapped him, and said, "Chant Hare Krishna." And then he went to a Kazi, who was known for not being so favorable towards the devotees. He went up to him and he said, "My dear sir, please chant Hare Krishna." He said, "I'll chant Krishna's names tomorrow." He's like, "Why wait till tomorrow? You've already done it once." And he went completely mad in an ecstasy. And then we see in the life of Lord Nityananda that when he was ordered by Chaitanya Mahaprabhu to go door to door and teach people Bolo Krishna, Bhajo Krishna, Koro Krishna Shiksha, that you just teach people how to chant Hare Krishna, you worship Krishna, and you teach people the instructions that Krishna has given in the Srimad Bhagavatam and the Bhagavad Gita. When he went out to do this, he was willing to approach even the most degraded and obnoxious people in the entire society, which are Jagai and Madai. Jagai and Madai were explained as being not only Dvija Bandhus, or those who have completely given up the principles of living a Brahminical, saintly kind of life, but simultaneously they were women hunters, they were drunkards, and they were known as like the worst cheaters in the land. But Lord Nityananda Prabhu, walking through the land of Navadvip with Haridas Thakur, he saw these two men, and he said, "If I can give them Lord Chaitanya's mercy, then surely this will glorify my Lord." So he went up to him and he told him, "Chant Hare Krishna," and they began to chase him away. And so Haridas Thakur says, this associate of mine, he causes me so many problems on a daily basis. He always puts me in these situations, and he gets me in trouble. And now we're going to die due to this Lord Nityananda. So he returned, and Haridas Thakur began to reveal his heart to Advaita Acharya. And Advaita Acharya says, well, it's befitting, because Lord Nityananda is a drunkard, so it's befitting that he would seek the association of other drunkards. So Lord Chaitanya, he was told of the activities of Lord Nityananda and Haridas Thakur. Just like we read our scores every morning, similarly the associates of Lord Chaitanya would return to him and report on the day's activities. And Lord Chaitanya, simply because you desired it, Lord Nityananda, surely these two brothers will be delivered. So he returned to them and he once again told them, "Chant Hare Krishna, Bolo Krishna." And Jagai, was it Madai? No, so Madai became very envious and angry, and he began to chase him away, and he took a broken pot and he actually threw it across the head of Lord Nityananda, and it split Lord Nityananda's head open. But Lord Nityananda continued, being a transcendental madman, told him, "You chant Hare Krishna, chant Hare Krishna," continuing to try to instruct him. Lord Chaitanya, being the Paramatma, the super soul situated within the heart of all living entities, could immediately understand the situation, so he started to head to the spot where Lord Nityananda and Haridas Thakur were encountering Jagai and Madai. And upon seeing them, he immediately lifted his chakra, and he was ready to cut off the head of the two brothers. But Jagai, after the pot was thrown at Lord Nityananda's head, and said, I think we've done something wrong here. So he began to surrender. And Lord Chaitanya, he lifted his Sudarshan chakra, and he was about to cut off their heads. And then Lord Nityananda said, my Lord, now is not the time. Now is not the time. If you kill these brothers, then you have to kill everyone in Kali Yuga. So in order to fulfill the desire of Lord Nityananda, the desire of Lord Chaitanya, Lord Nityananda was willing to approach the most degraded and most abominable people. So these are some wonderful examples of the associates of Lord Chaitanya. And they're not necessarily something that we should imitate, but rather it's something that we can look forward to, and we should try to emulate the overall mood. And this overall mood is wonderfully demonstrated and practically in the life of Srila Prabhupada. Srila Prabhupada was willing to go through anything and everything, coming over on a boat steamer with practically nothing, in order to give the message of Krishna to the Western countries. So this is the example that we can follow of Srila Prabhupada. Studying his life, I was reflecting on how many books we have of Srila Prabhupada's life, and I began to realize that actually I don't think there's any person in the history of the world who has a more well-documented 10 years period of time than Srila Prabhupada. We have access to his audio, we have access to his letters, we have access to his books. And not only that, we have all these biographies that have been written by Srila Prabhupada's disciples, like Harisari Prabhu. He wrote this Transcendental Diary, which is literally a day-by-day account of what Srila Prabhupada is doing. And within those audios, we have the room conversations. So there's no person to walk the planet, if you think about it, at least within the 20th century, who is more well-documented than the 10 years that Srila Prabhupada lived on the planet. So we've been given a perfect opportunity to study the practical behavior of one who's existing on the higher rungs of bhakti and understand how we ourselves can behave. And by following in the footsteps of Srila Prabhupada, we can be guaranteed to come to the highest level of Krishna consciousness within this very life. And I had a verse I would like to share with you guys, but maybe it's better if I take questions, or can I share the verse? Share? Okay, awesome. So this comes from the 11th canto, verse number 40. Second chapter, verse number 40. And this is a verse that Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati recommended the devotees follow. Now, I don't want to mess up the Sanskrit, especially in the presence of Dravida Prabhu, but if you would like to look it up, it's at the very end of the purport. 11.240, yeah. It's parivadantu jano yatatava.
Hare Krishna. All right. Parivadatu chano yatatava nanumakado nabayam vicharyamaha. Haridasan madada madati makta bhuvivitulamu natamu nibishama.
So the translation of this is really wonderful. It says, "Let the garrulous population say whatever they like. We shall pay them no regard. Thoroughly maddened by the ecstasy of the intoxicating beverage of love for Krishna, we shall enjoy life, running about, rolling on the ground, and dancing in ecstasy." Garrulous. So we'll take. I'll wrap up there, and if there's any questions or comments or reflections, it'll be a good time. Sure.
Hare Krishna. In the verse you quoted, Nitya Siddha Krishna Prem Sadhya Kamunoi Shravanadi Shuddha Chitte Kodayayudoi. Very nicely explained it. But one thing that can be a little puzzling there is that in that verse, he speaks to Sanatana Goswami, he says that this eternal perfection of love for Krishna is not a sadhya. It's intrinsic. And by hearing and chanting, it automatically awakens. But I thought that our whole process is the sadhana leading to the sadhya. And you know, Sanatana Goswami himself, when he first meets Lord Chaitanya, I don't know how to ask about sadhana and sadhya. Can you please explain it? So how is it not a sadhya?
Well, that's a really good question. Might be over my pay grade. Maybe you could elaborate. Maybe you can answer it.
I think I understand what you're getting at there, and that is that in the strictest sense, an activity, just not in relation to bhakti. There's sadhana and sadhya in all regards, and everyone is like you mentioned. That man, he had his sadhya. I'm going to be a millionaire, right?
Yeah.
And he had to go through various activities in order to get there. Maybe he's, of course, dissatisfied when he achieved it. So in that sense, the sadhya is not something intrinsic to you, but it's something that you have to work hard in order to find. It's another artificial thing. So in that very important sense, what we're looking for is not a sadhya. It's not something that artificial we're trying to achieve, but it's something we're trying to discover. We already have. We have to just uncover it. I think that's what he's saying in that verse.
Very interesting. I'm coming to that part of the Chaitanya Charitamrita, and I want to study it very thoroughly. So I'll get back to you.
Hare Krishna.
Hare
Thank you
Krishna.
for class.
What's your name, Prabhu?
Madhavapuri Das.
Oh, Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna. As Speaker of Grantaraj, your representative Vasudev, kindly dissipate my ignorance on this subject.
Sure. I'll do my best.
We understand that spirit and matter are categorically different.
Yes.
In the second chapter of Bhagavad Gita, it's perhaps unique amongst the corpus of Prabhupada's books in that it gives a systematic explanation of spirit and soul using neti, not this, not that. Cannot be burned by fire, moistened by water, cut by weapons. At the same time, we see references in the scriptures that the soul is 1/16th or 1/10,000th the tip of a hair, or that the spiritual world is 3/4 creation and 1/4 is material. Or, for example, in other parts of the Shastra, it talks about a certain location in which the Dham is located, a certain radius in which the deity is worshipped is considered the Dham. So it gives orders of magnitude, and we understand that, or at least, through some understanding that that which is composed of magnitude is under the influence of time. Even Lord Brahma, which has the most subtle body, is still under the stringent rules of time. So if we were to understand through the scripture that this is inconceivable and that this is of a spiritual magnitude, then should we also consider with full faith that everything in this temple, which is purely spiritual and also of magnitude, cannot be burned by fire, moistened by water, or cut by weapons?
That's an excellent point. That's an excellent point. Well, Krishna makes a very clear distinction between the two categories of energy in the 7th chapter of the Bhagavad Gita. And he illuminates Bhumirappanalo Vayu Kaham Manubur Evacha Ahankara Iti Amme Binam Prakritirasata. And then he says Apareyamidastvanyam Prakritim Vidime Param Jiva Bhutam Mahabaho Yayidam Darite Jagat. And then in the 8th chapter of the Bhagavad Gita, Krishna categorizes the nature of the inferior energy, which in the introduction of the Bhagavad Gita, Srila Prabhupada explains that the nature of the inferior material energy is unconscious, whereas the superior spiritual energy is conscious. So Krishna, while describing the nature of the material energy, describes it as dukkhalayam ashashvatam, and budva paliyate. So the nature of the material energy, although it may develop spiritual quality while in touch with the conscious spiritual energy, we should understand that we're dealing with a different category of nature when we're interacting with the material world. It develops spiritual quality, but that doesn't necessarily mean that it develops eternality when it comes in contact with the service of Krishna, when you're dealing with material elements. For instance, if we offer a ghee lamp to Krishna, in the spiritual world, the ghee lamp would probably just never run out. The ghee just continues to exist. But because we're dealing with finite material energy, we're using that in order to serve Krishna. But its nature is ultimately to be temporary. So we have to be discriminative when we're understanding these types of things. In a sense, it's material, but simultaneously, due to the purpose that it's being used for, it has its spiritual quality. But finally, in that series of verses in the 7th chapter, Krishna says, Eta yonani bhutani. What's that? Aham krishnasya jagataha pralaya pradastata. I can show you the verse, But basically Krishna is saying that you should understand that both of these energies have their source in me, and I am the source of all creation and destruction. So when you're dealing with the material energy, the nature is that it's created, it's maintained, and then it's destroyed. Even if that energy is being engaged in the service of the Lord, it's ultimately temporary. Until one comes to full realization of the nature of the spiritual world, while interacting with the temporary material world will simultaneously maintain its nature of bhutva praliyate, despite the fact it may be engaged in the service of the Lord. But the idea is that the purpose in which it was used for, nehabi kramanastoti pratavayo navidyate swamalpamapasya dharmasa trayate mahatobayat, by the person who used those things, they gain the eternal benefit of service to Krishna. Despite the fact that it may be temporary material substance, the purpose it was used for has an eternal quality. Does that satisfy you? Okay. Please, Maharaj.
We could take the example of prasadam. It's a material, you can see, you can get everything at Trader Joe's. It's matter. And yet when it's offered to Krishna, it becomes prasadam. It'll still rot. So is that material? Prabhupada, well, I'll say this first, but there's many examples of prasadam. I mean, we have Shastra, so we accept Shastra, that it has its purifying effect. But we had Dr. Kuruvadi, Papa Kuruvadi, Giridhari Prabhu. He had some surgery done on his throat, and they cut a nerve, and he couldn't taste anything. Everything tasted like straw. His wife is a fantastic cook. Everything tasted like straw. When he'd come to the temple, he could taste prasadam. There's a number of... Tulsi Sojitra's wife, fantastic cook, when she was first coming to the temple, her husband said, why don't you learn how to make this halava? Get the recipe. I have this halava at the temple. That lady can make sweets like you can't even imagine, right? She got the recipe from me. She went home and tried it, served it to her husband. Her husband wasn't satisfied. She said, it doesn't taste the same. She called me, you must have left an ingredient out. I said, no, everything's there. Then I asked her, did you offer it to Krishna? This is now they're devotees, but this was before. She said, no, I didn't. I said, well, try it again. Offer it to Krishna. Without telling her husband, same thing, same process, offered it to her husband. Her husband said, man, that's the taste I'm looking for. So, those are theoretical. Those are practical. Prabhupada tells the story about, because we're talking about how prasadam can rot. When you go to Vrindavan, it smells bad. If you have that vision. But Rupa Goswami showed Akbar, Akbar was so impressed, Maharaj Akbar, apex of the Mughal Empire, was so impressed by Rupa Goswami. He wanted to give him something. He said, you're living, he saw him, living, used clothing under a tree. Let me give you something. Rupa Goswami said, let me give you something. And he gave him spiritual vision. And Akbar saw the entire Vrindavan. Everything is jewels, Chintamani Dham. He thought, well, I'm giving him a few rubies. A few rubies, and he's living under a tree that's decked with rubies on a place that's made of diamonds. He said, so he just folded his hands and went away. Actually, what he did was he gave the money for building the Radha Damodar temple. Not Radha Damodar temple, the library at the Radha Damodar temple. And he sent Man Singh for building the Govindaji temple. He was so impressed. But we go to Vrindavan, we don't see that. But if you have the vision, you see it. So that's one thing. It may look, Prabhupada tells the story from the Padma Purana about the person coming back from Jagannath Puri. And the person coming back from Jagannath Puri, an old man and his son, someone coming back from Jagannath Puri, they always bring those clay pots, and they bring it back to their village, and it's a couple days walk and all that. One of those pots fell off a cart and broke, and the pilgrims returning home didn't realize it. The pot sat there and rotted. I heard Prabhupada tell this story personally. The pot rotted.
There was an old man and his son who were very hungry. They were so hungry, they didn't think prasadam, Jagannath, anything. They saw the rotten prasadam, they're so hungry they ate it. Then Prabhupada said a tiger came and ate the old man and the son. Prabhupada said the old man and the son were delivered because they'd taken the prasadam. And then Prabhupada said the tiger was delivered because the tiger had the prasadam. You know, when he ate them, along with it came the prasadam that was in their stomachs. Prabhupada said, just see the power of prasadam. So, on one hand, it requires vision. It requires realization. They asked Prabhupada one time in New Vrindavan, Kirtananda told me this, and Kaladri confirmed, if Krishna is the source of all life, see, these are the Stump the Swami questions. If Krishna is the source of all life, yes. When you put garlands on Krishna, why does the garland wilt? You know Prabhupada's answer? Prabhupada said, just so you have a chance to make another one. He's giving you the chance of service. So, you know, you can't really use material vision. I'll give you, and two less examples and I'll be done. I just heard Prabhupada give this one. Prabhupada said that, you know, a point has no length and no breadth, that by definition. But we know it has a length and breadth, otherwise it wouldn't exist. If it has no length and no breadth, it's nothing. So it must have a length and breadth. A point must have, but the very definition in geometry of a point is it has no length or breadth. But it has a point. And Prabhupada said, to stretch your mind even further, what came first? The sun or sunlight? And Prabhupada gives this example of nectar in the teachings of Lord Chaitanya. What came first? Well, but as soon as you have sun, you have sunlight. So Prabhupada he's giving the example of Krishna and the living entities existing simultaneously. We know that the sun came first. But as soon as there's the sun, there's the sunlight. So these trying to compare matter to spirit and sort the thing out, it is, as you were saying earlier, beyond our pay grade. We have examples of practical experience. We have Shastra. But matter's matter and spirit's spirit, and yet matter can be transformed. Prabhupada also said that he told Giriraj Maharaj this, that which is material can become spiritual when it's offered. But then he said that which is spiritual can become material. One can fall down from eating too much prasadam. Pack on that halava day in, day out. You know? So it's subtle. It's subtle, it requires intelligence, and you shouldn't overthink it. Hare Krishna. That's my shot.
Thank you, Maharaj.
Yeah, there we go.
You just remind me of this pastime of Lord Chaitanya, how the spirited state spirit, the devotees were offering all these different types of prasadam to Lord Chaitanya. They'd give it to Govinda and he would offer to Lord Chaitanya. And it was in the room. It was just building up for a year. And they would come and they would ask Govinda, so do you give it to Lord Chaitanya? Yeah. He would have to lie to them because there's just so many devotees were bringing.
Coming and harassing and asking questions. Did he take it?
Yeah. Like, so finally he went to Lord Chaitanya and said, Lord Chaitanya, so many devotees are coming, they're giving prasadam to you, and I don't want to lie to them. They're asking me, do you like the prasadam now? It's been building up for a year, all this prasadam. So Lord Chaitanya said, all right, bring it. So he just kept on bringing it and bringing it and bringing it, and he'd finished the whole room of prasadam. So it stayed spiritual by the mercy of Lord Chaitanya. Never rotted. It's India for a year in this room. You can't imagine.
You see our beautiful Jagannath Baladev Subhadra here. That's our second Subhadra. I wasn't the president here. I mean, it could have happened anyway, but I had just become it was a long story. We opened the curtains one day for Mangala. There used to be candles on the altar. And sometimes we used to have ghee, you know, you put a wick of ghee, that was in, then we went from ghee to candles, then from candles to nothing. But one of the reasons we went to nothing is they opened the curtains one day for Mangalarti. You would leave them burning at night. And Subhadra was gone. All that was there was a pile of ashes. Now, you can see how the clothes are touching, they're overlapped, the chadars are fanned out, pinned to, you know, to each other. Subhadra was completely gone, nothing but a pile of ashes. Baladev and Subhadra and Jagannath were untouched, unsinged, all of their clothes. What happened? Turns out that the pujari who used to put the Jagannath, we used to have two pujaris, and they would go in a tie, and then another pujari put together, you know, put to sleep the Radha Krishna, big and little Radha Krishna. Turns out that that pujari, after putting the deities to sleep, was going out and meeting a woman. And it had gone on for a month and nobody knew it. He was seeing her every night. And finally Subhadra said, enough! Poof! So how did that happen? You know, so it's matter, there's a candle, there's cloth, but why didn't the other, you know? So there are, you know, that which is material can become spiritual, that which is spiritual can become material. And we, you know, there's practical experience. You say, wow, okay, that's something far out. And then there's also Shastra. But squeezing it in, you know, how do you squeeze a 10-dimensional, picking a number, into a three-dimensional experience? It just doesn't, you know, that's where faith comes in.
Hare Krishna.
Prabhu, we have a question from the Vijay Prabhu. Do you want to take it?
No.
Okay.
We should let him go first next time. We should get now. We should let him go first. Prabhu! Yeah, let him go first next time.
Kantraj Srimad Bhagavatam ki jai. Vanchakapatru Vistra Kripasinideva Chapatitanam Bhavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha.